President Buhari inaugurates Committee on National Development. Nigeria's debt hits 31 trillion naira in 3 months. NBS banking sector report says credit to economy up by 1.79%. Oil prices slip as growing stockpiles signal bumpy fuel demand recovery. Plus, Business Express today will focus its searchlight on the present administration's economic scorecard so far. The program is reaching you on the network service of the NTA. I am Leah Katung Baba Tunde. Information from the Debt Management Office show that budget support loan from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) as well as domestic borrowing to finance the revised 2020 Appropriation Act raised Nigeria's public debt stock to 31.009 trillion naira as of June 30, 2020. The total debt stock jointly accumulated by the federal, 36 state governments and the Federal Capital Territory rose by 2.381 trillion naira from the 28.628 trillion naira reported in March this year. The DMO debt report released Wednesday indicates the increase in debt stock was accounted for by the $3.36 billion budget support loan from the IMF, new domestic borrowing to finance the revised 2020 Appropriation Act, including the issuance of the 162.557 billion naira sukuk and promissory notes issued to settle claims of exporters is responsible for the rise. 5.365 trillion naira of the budget is intended to be funded by domestic and foreign borrowing, while direct revenue funding will cover 5.158 trillion naira. The DMO said it now expects the public debt stock to further expand as government raises the balance of the new domestic borrowing and disbursements on funding support by the World Bank, Africa Development Bank and the Islamic Development Bank come in. The expected funding support from these multilateral agencies are part of arrangements to finance the revised 2020 budget, in addition to promissory notes expected to be issued in the course of the year, which, if added to new borrowings by state governments, also are expected to increase the public debt stock. A high-powered steering committee that will chart a new course for Nigeria's National Development Plan has been inaugurated by President Muhammadu Buhari. The committee is to prepare the nation's medium-term National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 as well as Agenda 2050 to succeed Nigeria's Vision 2020 and the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. The president described the task as vital towards the transformation of the nation's economic fortunes.
The main objectives of these exercise plans are to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within the next 10 years, particularly given the World Bank's projection that Nigeria will become the world's third most populous country by 2050.
Now, Nigerians wake each day to new expectations for better life as they look up to government for the fulfillment of these desires. Government at all levels, in turn, occasionally take a look at the scorecard with a view to undertake assessment of stewardship, bearing in mind the contract signed with the people. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari recently led his team members on a reassessment of his administration scorecard in a retreat. Has progress been made? And if yes, to what degree? These are questions our guest, Professor Mohammed Tafik Ladan, Director General, Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, will attempt to answer as we collectively take a look at this scorecard. You're welcome to Business Express, Prof.
Thank you. Good morning to all.
Okay. At the just concluded ministerial retreat, President Muhammadu Buhari directed the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and all other responsible agencies to ensure speedy and timely release of funds to MDAs for the implementation of the Economic Sustainability Plan and, of course, the capital projects in the 2020 budget. Let's have your view on that.
Good morning. I think in the first place, the presidential directive to the minister, and I would rather say it is actually even long overdue. So as it was issued actually at the retreat, is actually very timely and very important because the president is the primary responsible leader in Nigeria today by virtue of his constitutional obligation under Section 14, subsection 2, paragraph B and paragraph C of this section to ensure that the primary purpose of government, which is promoting the security and welfare of all Nigerians, is actually realized. And the participation of actually Nigerians in economic activities of Nigeria within the sectors so designated by the Constitution are also realized. And it is also his responsibility, as the chief economic actually planner of the nation, to ensure that his administration's plan, including the Economic Sustainability Plan of 2020, which was approved by FEC in June, is essentially actually implemented consistent with the constitutional obligation of this administration under Section 16 of the Constitution, which talks about economic objectives, i.e. the state, i.e. which means the government, shall have the responsibility to put a policy on ground that seeks to ensure the promotion of a planned and balanced economic development that seeks to serve the common good of all Nigerians and that seeks to promote also national prosperity and also maximizes, the welfare and freedom of all Nigerians, in all sectors of the economy.
Okay, Prof, can I just come in here? What will be your thoughts on the charge by the President for ministers to ensure that funds released are utilized efficiently and transparently in implementing the programs and projects along the 9 priorities of government?
Yes, I mean, you can see that the presidential directive is actually based on that constitutional responsibility that I mentioned. And it is also the basis of why we have, the Economic Sustainability Plan, which was developed as a 12-month transit plan between Economic Recovery and Growth Plan of 2017-2020 and the new one that is actually yet to come into force. And if you look at the Economic Sustainability Plan that was adopted by FEC in June, 2020, it has a 2.3 trillion naira transit plan for a 12-month plan, and the sources of funding of that plan are clearly articulated in the Economic Sustainability Plan. And so the charge by Mr. President to the Ministers of Finance, National Planning, and the CBN Governor is for them to be able to coordinate and to timely put their heads together and ensure the implementation of the Sustainability Plan. Because take, for instance, the Economic Sustainability Plan, 2020, adopted by FED, provided actually very clearly sources of its funding. It says 500 billion naira will actually come from special federal government accounts, 1.1 trillion naira from the CBN in the form of structured lending, 334 billion naira from external bilateral and multilateral sources, 302.9 billion naira from other funding sources. So these are the clear sources of funding of the Economic Sustainability Plan as approved by FEC in June this year. And so when the president actually yesterday charged them, to coordinate and collaborate in a timely implementation and intervention, based on this plan. He is actually saying the obvious. And I think it is time for them to really put their heads together and make sure that the releases are made to actualize the 2020 revised, budget, that was actually revised on the basis of the negative impact of COVID-19, on government revenue, that is one, and also on increased expenditure needs on health and economic stimulus plan, etc.
Okay,
So this
Prof.
is the basic.
Now, in the light of this, monitoring and evaluation, how important is transparency and accountability in the process of rebuilding the economy if all these funds are going to be plowed into the various sectors we're talking about?
I think in the first place, the ministers so charged. And I think the president also did not only charge the ministers, the key ministers are finance, national planning, and the CBN governor, but then he also charged, other ministers who are equally having the responsibility to ensure that when the funds are released, they must show prudence in the management of the resources so released, particularly for capital project implementation under the revised actually 2020 Appropriation Act. Now, what that means is that first we need to actually look at the challenges of the impact of COVID-19 on national economy and on the micro, small, medium enterprises and the dwindling revenue and the high cost of governance and the quality of government spending on capital projects and the cost of borrowing. All these are factors that essentially further complicate debt borrowing, actually, the debt situation in Nigeria. And so what it means clearly is for these actually ministers so charged and for all other members of the Federal Executive Council charged by Mr. President at the retreat is for them to actually, religiously observe the implementation plan embedded actually in the Economic Sustainability Plan of 2020, which has 4 key principles. Local content and self-reliance, the key principle number 1. Principle number 2 is economic stimulation. Number 3, job preservation and creation. And number 4, addressing the poor and actually vulnerable groups, as a focus of the plan. So these are the 4 key guiding principles. So the ministers and other members of the FEC, are expected, to coordinate and collaborate to ensure not only releases of the 2.3 trillion naira for the economic sustainability plan, but to ensure prudent management of these resources, particularly capital projects that will address these 4 key guiding principles, and at the same time address in the plan clearly 8 key intervention actually areas. For instance, mass agriculture program, infrastructure development, including housing, and other sectors, business support actually for business for MSMEs, informal sector support, digital economy actually, investment, expansion of actually national social investment, programs, and also cutting non-essential spending in 2020, and then finally support for state governments. So there are 4 key guiding principles that I mentioned earlier, and there are 8 key intervention programs that all the ministers and members of the FEC must actually ensure that they coordinate and collaborate in the releases and also in the prudent management of the resources so released.
Okay, Prof. And now let's move to the public opinion. Now, what the public is saying about some of these things you have mentioned, like for instance, the report from the Debt Management Office that came just yesterday. It put Nigeria's debt stock at 31 trillion naira as of June this year. Now, is this a cause for worry, knowing that the economy is still in a bit of shock?
Well, I think in fairness to the Debt Management Office, which explained that the increase in the debt stock was as a result of the budget support loan from IMF, African Development Bank, and also Islamic Development Bank, and the new domestic borrowing to finance the revised 2020 Appropriation Act, which was necessitated, by the negative impact of COVID-19 on government revenues and increased expenditure needs on health and economic stimulus plan. But I think if you look at the debt profile, I think we need to also understand that of the 31 trillion naira debt profile, the federal government only owed 25.82 trillion, which is about 81.52%, while the 36 states and the FCT owe 5.73 trillion naira, or 18.48% of the total country's debt. Now, this is a cause actually for Nigerians to actually be worried about. But at the same time, it is about how disciplined is the government actually in terms of servicing commitment of this actually debts, both domestic actually servicing and also foreign debt actually servicing commitment. So if we have an injected discipline in terms of how we intend to service this actually domestic borrowing and then actually external debt servicing, then it will provide a sense of actually relief or understanding on the part of the Nigerian citizens who really are not bothered about the figures. They are simply interested in, when you borrow, where are you putting this money actually into? And when are we going to feel the impact, of the money so borrowed, whether, from the external or from the domestic actually borrowing actually platforms. And I think at the end of the day, the choice of selecting poor and vulnerable group, addressing also the negative impact of COVID-19 on micro, small, and medium enterprises, and I must add quickly, and also the self-employed. These are the group that in the last 6 months, happen to be the hardest hit in Nigeria. And so we have no reason, when already we are in September, for the 2020 actually revised budget, not to actually go far in the implementation, of the revised budget 2020, and also in the implementation of the stimulus actually package of 2.3 trillion naira, that is already
Okay, now still on this 2.3 trillion naira, when we placed it aside the GDP figures, for instance, released in the second quarter, and virtually every data that came out at that time, we've not really had some positive notes from the data side. Now, 2.3 trillion naira, what do you see as the multiplier effect? Will it make any significant change?
Well, I think, in my view, I'm not necessarily an economist.
Oh, sure.
But I believe strongly that from all the actually figures and also the analysis and also the concern of Mr. President, it is very clear that he believes strongly that Nigerians essentially would like to see strategic intervention, that will impact, positively on the quality of their lives and also on the standard of living of Nigerians.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. I think we're going to just let it end there at this moment. I've been speaking to Professor Ladan. Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're still watching Business Express reaching you from Abuja, and when we return, we will serve you with a special on government closure of the subsidy files for petrol and electricity. Like two unwanted but necessary visitors, they announced the new price tags, the same time leaving their host, that is the consumer, to groan. Tariff for electricity up and petrol now above 160 naira per litre. So, what are the issues that prompted this rise, or shall I say, this visit? Mia Ogidi engaged some experts for explanations.
Nigeria, a country with an estimated population of about 200 million people, fuel consumption is between 40 and 57 million litres on daily basis. The National Bureau of Statistics in its 2019 report reveals that Nigeria consumed about 20.8 billion litres of fuel. A breakdown of this figure shows that about 57 million litres of fuel was consumed on daily basis, and the federal government paid a subsidy of about 595 billion naira. So, in a country where the population is growing faster than the economy, the federal government was frontal in telling subsidy that coming and going these several seasons do stay out of the nation's treasury.
The truth of the matter is that subsidizing fuel is no longer feasible.
It is no longer feasible, so petrol and electricity go for self-funding. Despite the increase, the filling station never goes quiet. The price of fuel has experienced 10 major adjustments. In 2000, for instance, the price of fuel was 22 naira per litre. Now it's 160 in 2020. As the consumer cries over the price, the federal government also gets scared of the treasury, as over 10.4 trillion naira is paid as subsidy in 14 years.
People are going to be building refineries near the borders so that they are able to buy subsidized fuel and then take it outside the country where there are no subsidies. So how does that run? Is it poor people that run filling stations?
Now, subsidy out, deregulation in. Free market for those fit to play, while the federal government assumes the position of a referee.
Nigeria ranks among the top 7 cheapest country with petroleum product. So the government must redefine PPPR's responsibility.
Like a man fighting two enemies at the same time, federal government closes the subsidy files for the payment of power supply. Files that contained approval of about 1.7 trillion naira in just 4 years. And the year 2020 is still counting, and the treasury is already bleeding.
The subsidy on energy alone for 2020 is put at 540 billion naira. I mean, COVID has affected us. Look at what happened in the international oil market. It affected us seriously. So government fund has reduced. Therefore, let's bring in private equity. As a matter of fact, that is one of the things that led to privatization.
So, federal government invokes the powers of the multi-year tariff order. Tariff now moves from cost reflective to service reflective. A kilowatts per hour is now 66 and not 22.
Well, as a matter of fact, there is in the MITO, the multi-year tariff order had said that every 5 years and every 6, there should be a major change in the tariff.
2 challenges, 1 solution. That is the removal of subsidy in fuel and that of electricity. But the question is, will this be the final nail on the coffin of subsidy in the country? That is the question many are asking. And if this will be the solution, how this money that removed from fuel subsidy can be reinvested in other sectors of the economy for the well-being of the masses. Mia Ogidi.
Now, stocks in Nigeria are off to a slow start after logging 3 straight days of losses. European stocks were steady on Thursday ahead of a European Central Bank decision and press conference in which expectations are for the central bank to raise concerns about the rise of the euro. Moplang Dakok has been looking at markets around the globe.
Stocks in Asia were mixed in Thursday trading as shares in Indonesia and China fall. Shanghai Composite Index of China went down 0.60%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was 0.01% lower, while the Nikkei 225 in Japan rose 0.88% to close at 23,235.47. European markets are seen opening in mixed territory on Thursday ahead of the European Central Bank's latest meeting on monetary policy on the Eurozone. London's FTSE is seen opening 16 points lower at 5,997. Germany's DAX up 16 points and the CAC 40 of France also up by 4 points at 5,751. Equities had bounced back on Wednesday, halting days of losses driven by mega stocks like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, and Tesla. United stock futures were higher in early Thursday morning trading. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 49 points. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq saw similar minute gains. The Nasdaq Composite had risen to pull itself out of correction territory on Wednesday. With Global Market Update, Muplang Dakok.
Now that does it on this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is NTA News Now. Don't forget to use the hashtag BizEx. Remember to always wash your hands with soap on the running water. Business Express returns Friday, 3 p.m. I am Leah Katung. Baba Tunde.